Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my reaction video to the big Thursday night win against the Green Bay Packers. And wow, what a resilient win for this team. They go down 10-0 early, but they stay with the game plan. They don't veer from it. They don't panic. And I just really loved what this game was, not just the win, but what it represents also for this team going forward. I really think that this is going to be hopefully the game we look back on later in the season and say, yeah, that was really the turning point of our season to really get things going in the positive direction. And I did want to wait until after the game last night to sort of see exactly where we stood as it relates to the standings for the division. The Saints come up with the big win against Dallas, which I think really sort of resets where things stand, not just in our division, but in the NFC as well. And it really shows exactly maybe where the Eagles stack up against some of those teams. I think our offense is in a lot better shape than theirs, but both those teams' defenses are really good, and I think that's something we're going to have to be looking at going forward. But let's go ahead and take a look back at this game against the Packers. There are a couple duds that I can talk about. We'll talk about the bad first. So we'll talk about a few duds as it relates to this game. I did consider adding Doug to the duds list. Ultimately decided not to, because I think the game planning and all that and what he was able to do to get this team to get up for this game, I think outweighs it all. But there were a couple things that sort of bothered me about what he did in this game that I do want to point out. First of all is the issue of going for 2 when you're up by 7 and that puts you up 9 versus kicking the extra point and going up 8. I understand why you do that, because the worst case scenario, if you miss it, is they're only going to tie you then if they go for 1, versus if you make it, the reward is a lot better because now it's a 2-possession game. But when you're up 8, I think there is sort of still a 2-score mentality, because they are going to have to score twice, in the sense they're going to have to get a touchdown and then 1 play to get a 2-point conversion. So I really think it does put added pressure on the offense, of the other team. So I don't get why you do that. So for that reason, I didn't like when he did it in the Washington game earlier. I don't like what he did here. It worked then, it didn't here. And we saw that ended up being then a situation where we were only ever able to be up a touchdown rather than be up 8 points. The other thing I didn't like was the fact that, after what he sees earlier in the game when they challenge a pass interference and doesn't get overturned on a very similar play in terms of, just how much of a pass interference it was, he does the same thing. I don't know why you're doing that. For the record, I agreed with both of the situations where they did not reverse the call in those instances. I think that review rule has been put in place to get rid of the most egregious situations, like what happened in the NFC Championship game, not what happened in these games. These are much more, judgment call kind of situations, where if either one of them had been called pass interference, I would have saw it and I would have said, yeah, I see why they call that. But it's not so egregious that it was like, how did you miss that? And I think that's what they're trying to overturn. So for that reason, I agreed with neither call getting overturned, and I think they had to do that to keep it consistent. So I don't know why Doug is challenging it after he saw what happened when they challenged it as well. And then the other criticism I have for him is we were running the ball really well at the end of the game with about 5 minutes left. You've got like a 2nd and 5 or something like that, and you decide to throw the ball. I just think that's a mistake in that instance. Does Green Bay know you're probably going to run there? Yeah, they probably do. But we had been able to run against them even when they knew we were going to run in the past. So I just thought that they had done one pass earlier in that drive that I thought was important to sort of keep the defense honest. But I don't think we needed to continue to go to the pass at that point. You needed to have the clock run, and you needed to keep going with what was working in that game, which was the running game. So I did have a little discrepancy and problem with that. But for the most part, they did stay committed to the run game, which I'll get to in a moment. I do have 2 duds, though, that I do want to call out in this game. Number 2 is going to be Mac Hollins. Lackluster effort he gave on that one route on the sideline. Was able to get pushed out of bounds way too easily. I don't just understand how you're running routes like that. If you're a guy that's that far down the depth chart, and you're given an opportunity, you think you would try and run the best possible routes you can. And for that reason, I'm going to criticize Mac Hollins for that. The other guy I'm going to put on my duds list is going to be Zach Brown. He's got the 2 penalties that are costly in this instance. The face mask, which you can argue whether or not that's truly a face mask, but I guess according to the rules it is if you're grabbing the helmet. although I've seen that happen in other games and not get called, so, but whatever. The other thing is also that I'll take a gripe with is the when he suplexes the guy and tackles him. There's no need to do that as well. The whistle had already blown. You just bring the guy down. There's no need to add the extra force to it. And I just think that kind of stuff is just stupid stuff that gets you in trouble. I thought about giving the referees a dud as well, I should say, on this list as well, just because of how long it took them to do a few things. The one play where they don't blow it dead, where it was obvious that Carson was down when the ball comes out, fine, they let it go. That's what they're supposed to do, especially after what happened a couple weeks ago against New Orleans. So I understand why they're doing that. But on the same instance, why then aren't you trying to just get it done as quickly as possible? There was no reason to take that long then to do that review. It was pretty obvious that he was down when that ball came out. So there was no need for it to take that long. And that's one thing that the league has to figure out is on some of those obvious reviews, they need to figure out a way to make it go where they can just call down and say, there's no even need to take a look at this. It's fine. Go with it. So some of that stuff I think they need to streamline a little bit. But with a win like this, there's a lot to talk about in terms of studs of the week, and there are quite a few candidates that I could name in this one. One guy I'm not going to put on the list is going to be Nigel Bradham. He has the big interception at the end, but he also had one that hit him right in the hands earlier in the game that he doesn't come up with. So I was debating about a couple different guys putting on at the bottom of this list, and for that reason, I'm leaving Nigel Bradham off if I'm only going to stick with 5. My number 5 dud of the week is going to be Derek Barnett. He comes up with a huge strip sack, which is really one of the 2 plays in this game that I think were huge game changers. And he'd be higher on this list if it weren't for the fact that he has the dumb penalty earlier in the game that ends up giving them a personal foul and gives them an extra 15 yards. So ultimately, I think that Derek Barnett comes up with a huge play, though. That's a big game changer. It had been an issue coming into this game, how much pressure our defensive line was getting. So the fact that he comes up with that big play, uses his speed, gets to Rodgers, knocks the ball loose, and then we have the reverse of the Super Bowl, where instead of Graham knocking it out and Barnett recovers it, Barnett knocks it out and Graham recovers it. So great play, huge play, obviously a game-changing play. Derek Barnett, my number 5 stud of the week. My number 4 stud of the week is going to be Carson Wentz. I know there's a lot of fans that are criticizing him for some missed throws, but if you watch the NFL and you watch games every week, you're going to see even some of the best quarterbacks miss throws occasionally. That's just what happens. Nobody is going to be perfect. So ultimately, Carson Wentz did what he needed to do to win this game. Think of the things that didn't happen in this game. He didn't take any sacks. He didn't throw any interceptions. He didn't fumble the ball or get strip sacked. So when you look at all of those things and you add them all up, that's a recipe to winning football in this league, is if you're not turning the ball over, you're not taking sacks and making negative plays, that's huge. While he doesn't have the yards, he does have 3 touchdown passes. So all in all, I think this was a solid game from Carson Wentz. Was it one of his best games ever? No, but he did what he needed to do to make sure we won that game. And for that reason, Carson Wentz is my number 4 stud of the week. My number 3 stud of the week is going to be the guy who I was criticizing a lot last week, but he really came through this week, and that's Miles Sanders. He comes up with the huge kickoff return, which is the first of those big play game changers that really sort of turns this game around. And just the way that, that ends up really, I think, affecting how the game plays out and how we ultimately win. We had just gone down 10-0. We needed something to get us started, and that return sets us up huge, puts us on a short field. We're able to take it in, get the touchdown, get right back into the game. That was a huge play, and for that reason, Miles Sanders, plus he also ran the ball well in this game, but especially for that kickoff return, Miles Sanders is my number 3 stud of the week. My number 2 stud of the week is going to be the other running back, Jordan Howard. This game was won running the ball, and as a result, you've got to really recognize both running backs for what they did in this game. And Jordan Howard was fantastic in this game. He was something we had been calling for all along to see him utilized more. He has the touchdown hat trick. So he's the one that really from that level really puts the team forward and puts them on his back and gets the scores to really get us to where we win the game. So all in all, Jordan Howard has a fantastic game. I'm hoping that this is similar to what we had 2 years ago in the 4th game of the season, when LeGarrette Blount had his sort of coming out party against the Chargers, where we went out there and we ran all over them. Carson Wentz in that game didn't have a lot of yards, but he made the plays when he needed to. And really it was one on the ground with LeGarrette Blount going for like over 130 yards. In this instance, the running was split between the two guys, but Jordan Howard was the one that was really utilized heavily, and he had a fantastic game and really deserves a lot of credit for us winning that game. Like, a lot of that goes to Jordan Howard. My number one stud of the week is going to be Matt LaFleur for the stupid game planning they have at the end of the game, where they've got a 1st and goal from the 1-yard line and they pass the ball 4 times. If I were a Green Bay fan, I'd be going nuts. No, in all seriousness, I'm not going to make it Matt LaFleur, but I did want to recognize the fact that I think the Eagles got a little lucky there, that he had some sort of brain cramp and decided not to run it at least once on one of those 4 downs. I realize that the Eagles have been really good at stopping their run game, but you got to figure at least once they're going to try and run it there. I don't know why he doesn't. No, but number one stud's got to be me, right? I'm the one that came up with the game plan. I was on here talking last week about how we needed to run the ball more, give it to Jordan Howard and all that kind of stuff. I came up with the winning game plan, so it's got to be me, right? No, in all seriousness, I am not going to give it to me. I'm not going to give it to Matt LaFleur. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give the number one stud of the week to 5 guys, and that's the 5 guys that won us this football game, and that's the 5 guys that make up our offensive line. The offensive line in this game was absolutely dominant. The holes that our running backs are running through were big enough to run Mack trucks through. I talked earlier about Carson Wentz not taking any sacks. A lot of that had to do with the fact that there was a lot of times he didn't have the duress. And Green Bay came in with some of the, I think at that point they had the highest number of sacks in the NFC, and we completely shut them out from sacking our quarterback. A lot of that had to do with the offensive line. This offensive line played like what we thought it was, which was one of the premier offensive lines in football. They played like it Thursday night, and they deserve a lot of credit for what happened. So for that reason, my number one stud of the week is going to be Jason Peters, Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelce, Brandon Brooks, and Lane Johnson. Those 5 guys were phenomenal in this game, and they deserve all the credit for what happened. So those are my thoughts. Those are my studs and duds for the game. Let me know what you think. Is there anybody you think I missed? Is there anybody that I should have listed on the duds that I didn't? Are there studs that you think that I shouldn't have included or should have included? Let me know in the comments below. Obviously going to check in before the game next Sunday against the Jets, which should be a win, you would think. Hopefully there's not a come down after this huge win against the Packers. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll check in, like I said, before Sunday. Until then, fly Eagles fly.